What is up, grinders, and welcome back to another Crunch Time Before Lock UFC. Who the hell knows what Vegas card this is now? They don't even keep track themselves. Squirrel's laughing in the corner, but I am Mike Brown, aka H3 Buddha, here with my pal John Squirrel Patrol. John, we've got a mixed bag of barf. I'm just going to call it how it is, but this is such a volatile card that if you have some stances on this card, you can really kind of go up the leaderboard fast, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's a lower level card. You know, they're saving a lot of the good fights for the upcoming pay-per-views. You know, some major pay-per-view events going on. So this one not the highest level, but it can be just as entertaining, and especially for our purposes, the DraftKings points count the same. So it's an interesting card. You always see like ownership concentrate. And there is really nowhere that it should be concentrating on this card. So yeah, it's pretty wide open, but it should be a fun Saturday afternoon.
I think it's going to be fun too. 13 fights. Knock on wood, we've been having decent numbers for the cards. Next week is 14 fights, but we're stuck with 13. That's fine. I think 13 is a great number. Unlucky in some regards, but not for fantasy-wise when it comes to the MMA world. Now, give me your overall rundown of the card, because honestly, we have a rematch nobody wants. We have the main event, which is a near 50-50 spot. We have some inside the distance guys, which I think are pretty decent chalk, quote unquote. And then I'm targeting these fights that normally would be in a second tier for me. I'll throw one out there, man. And we don't have to start here. I'm just saying Randy Brown versus Salikov, right? Like, that's not a fight I would love to target long-term, but I feel like ownership would dictate me towards that this week. It's weird. Like you said, concentrated ownership makes me make some decisions that I don't like.
Yeah. So it's a collection of fighters, like kind of high-priced fighters that might not score well. And then, kind of mid-range fighters where, they have less of a chance of winning, but probably a better chance of putting up a high score. I think Randy Brown is the place you can go. Like, I think he'll come in over 20%. I'm going to be over 20% on him. Like my large field builds. The issue is he's a little bit pricey at 9,100, and Muslim Salikov usually does not have
way slow.
Yeah,
super slow pace.
So Brown might not need to throw 300 significant strikes to get a win here, and so he might have a lower scoring win, which at 9,100, it's tougher to get there because he is a little bit higher in the price range.
Yeah, and that is just the slate that it is. You have these upper echelon fighters. The starting point, people usually like to click the highest priced fighter. This is a tricky spot now. Natalia Silva, 9,500. It's one of those spots where we could all look like idiots if we fade her, right? Like, she is a very talented young woman that has surging up the rankings. But, Arujo, somewhat durable. This fight's expected to go to decision. You have your prototypical 2-1 inside the distance for the highest priced fighter, which is not normal. Normally you see the -150s, the -200 plus for the inside the distance. So that's difficult to get behind. But when you have Molly McCann in a rematch, that's the card that it is. It's just fractional decision making between two. I almost want to say I like McCann a little bit more right below her. So these are the decisions in the upper echelon that you have to be making.
Yeah, like Natalia Silva is like a prototypical fighter that looks really good before the card because she has the best chances of winning. When you've got 13 winners at the end of the night, what are her chances of being one of the top six? Probably not that high, and she needs to be priced at 9,500 because she's, unless you have a bunch of underdogs winning at the really low end of the price range, she's going to get squeezed off the winning lineup unless she's does put up the top score of the night, or at least one of the top six scores. And she just doesn't have that kind of fighting style. So yeah, she's a fighter. She's actually not drawing that much ownership, so I may end up being over the field. But she normally you think $9,500 fighter on DraftKings is going to be somebody that's got a 40-50% chance of a first round finish. And is likely to end inside the distance. Natalia Silva is not like that. She has a 108 point DraftKings score in her UFC career, but Yeah, she also has a 58-point decision win.
I think it was against a stripper. Just throwing it out there.
Oh, the 108 points. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, she's also got other 2 UFC fights, right? In the 85-point range, and that's probably where she lands in a win, and that's just not likely to do it at 9,500.
We talk about ownership going to one spot. I probably should have tagged this person. I just thought it was a little bit worrisome that all the ownership's here. Themba, man. Themba gets the Rock behind him. The UFC's behind him. He could let them down. Let's be honest. Like, he's only, 70%? It's a big favorite. So he should go out and grapple. But I feel like this guy might just do that. Like, he's not going to sit there and try to bang for 3 rounds. Rodriguez does have some heat. That's about it. I mean, he's actually the really good leverage play, right? If you're playing Pete Rodriguez and he kills off, because it's directly correlated to a first-round finish for him too, that would be some really good leverage. I just don't know if you can get behind it because Themba's really working his way up, and the marketing machine's behind him. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. This line is actually a little bit worrisome. It's like moving in the direction of Rodriguez. And like everything I've listened to, I try to listen to like a few videos of Liam puts out like excellent stuff out on YouTube. I try to listen to his stuff. Try to listen to some other content, and like everybody is just kind of skipping over this fight, going like Pete Rodriguez sucks. But the line is not like it's 2-1. It's not some kind of like 9-1 long shot where with Rodriguez, and it's moving in the direction of Rodriguez. It makes me a little bit nervous because he does seem like such a good play. And I'd like them to win, right? Like when I sit down to watch these fights, I want them to win. He's got a good story. Like he's the guy like last year going into his UFC fight, he had like put a Bank of America screenshot out on Twitter. He had like $7 in his Bank of America account, like going into the fight, got the win, and now
bonus, I think.
Yeah, I think he got the bonus as well. So he's kind of a great story. And he should put up points. He should win. He should put up points. He's got the best odds for a first-round finish of anybody on the card. So I'm probably going to be right with the field on the ownership. It is just concerning. The line is like moving in the direction of Rodriguez, and that makes me a little bit more open to Rodriguez as a leverage play. Whereas I wasn't so much like yesterday.
It's terrifying though. It really is. It's like Themba has that ceiling of that grappler that could score 120 points in over 3 rounds. It's almost like if he gets too quick of a finish, like 1:30, that might not be a good thing for him, right? Like you'd rather it be like 4.5 minutes in that first round, then he gets a submission, gets a ground and pound type win. But those are the fractional things in the DFS sphere. That's kind of frustrating to be a host.
Yeah, you want somebody to put up over 30 points a round, right? Because like the drop down from a first round win to a second round win, to a third round win is 25, 30 points on DraftKings. So you want somebody that can put up like 30 points in a round, right? That they don't win that round. Like that they win the round on the judges' scorecards, but like they don't actually end the fight in that round. So you're trying to get like 30 points in a round, and Themba is somebody that can do that.
Yeah, definitely. We have not talked about any underdogs. There's one underdog that you and I both tagged. I don't have a lot of faith going into the week on this underdog, but after watching the weigh-ins, man, oh my God, what is going on with Kizrayev? I mean, this guy was a Russian takedown artist. The thing is, he's been so inconsistent. So I think we both tagged Muradov because he's been active, right? He's got the Floyd Mayweather sponsorship behind him, 2 million followers on Instagram. He's got takedowns. He's got decent striking on the feet. I would argue he's competitive on the feet against Kizrayev as long as it lasts there. Very, very interesting spot because I think people will want to go to a takedown artist who shows 100-something points in his first win, right? He's got 104 points in his first win. I was hoping it would be a little bit more leverage. I think we both were.
Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of both sides of this fight. And it could stall out, but like Muradov doesn't necessarily need a huge score to win. And Kizrayev, and they're both capable of putting up high scores. So I feel like this is the fight most likely to get canceled at like 4:00. Like so much of the fight that they're gonna be like, oh, and just Kizrayev came down sick. Bring back late swap. But yeah, so I like both sides of this fight. I love Muradov. I mean, Muradov's too cheap at 7,400. Like the line is not that wide, so the line has moved in his direction. I presume since pricing came out because like you're getting a little bit of win equity and you're getting the potential of a high score with Muradov. But like Kizriev is not that high priced either. He's 8,800, and like he could put up the monster score as well. It's two grapplers, so they could stall out. So like relatively, I have more Muradov just because he doesn't need as much to get there.
That's my worry. It would be the stalling out, but I think that Kizriev is going to rely on those takedowns and controls, so he's just going to continually shoot, hopefully, and that just presents more fantasy upside for Muradov. Like people sometimes think that, oh yeah, he'll just stall against the cage, but what do you see? You see this all the time where he's like head on the crotch, right, and then he's just doing these little punches, and I'm like, just keep going, just keep throwing the little pitter patter.
Points too,
exactly, hidden scoring, but we talk about the lack of underdogs that we've even talked about so far. I'm living in the middle range, so we'll talk about that in 1 second. I think the organic play is Dolidze. I mean, you've got a guy that is, decent pick'em type spot. It was headed towards pick'em during the week, but he's 7,600. He allows you to do a lot more lineups than rostering Imavov. I have to say, though, if Imavov is the guy that wins this fight, I'm worried about what the ceiling is going to look like because he might get stalled out in the first round. I worry about this fight as a whole, to be honest. Let's be clear about that. Like, if this thing's going to be a third, fourth round, there's going to be potential for somebody to win one round. The other fighter takes over for another round. Like, there's a lot of worry and unknowns in this fight. I wonder if you're just going to play it because of that uncertainty, or if there's enough ownership here with 40% for Imavov on lineup HQ and 30% for Dolidze.
I think I'm a little bit over the field on Dolidze and under the field on Imavov by a little bit. It's like plus odds to end in under 2.5 rounds, also plus odds to end in 3.5. So like what they're saying is the fight's probably going to end in the third round. According to Vegas. Now, obviously, that's not necessarily definitely going to happen, but that's probably the worst case scenario for this fight because it's not going to be that high pace. So, a little bit of a lower paced fight if it goes 5 rounds. The extra rounds of scoring can maybe land, especially Dolidze on that winning lineup. But they get into the third round. It's just another fight and a low paced one. And that might be seeing more ownership than it should.
It's funny, like it's all correlated to that. The 5 rounds you got to work with, and it's like, yes, those 5 rounds are tremendous, but when there's inactivity or ability for instance, Dolidze gets a takedown that first round, controls, then Imavov takes over down the stretch. I think he's durable enough that it's like a third, fourth round finish. It just doesn't score well. So I agree 100% that that's one that perhaps we have an edge on if the field is just going to jam in the main event here. But this broadcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Crunch time. Bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. New users in Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And if I'm getting some bonus bets, I'm sprinkling on some of these inside the distance lines in the middle range. Are you as high on this middle range as I am? If you go from Medeiros, Moicano, Lee, Stolyarenko, these are the fights. 2 of these fighters can easily score 100 plus points on this slate. Absolutely demolish the slate. And I'll tell you where my starting point is, and it's scary, and it's probably not the best take in the world. Renato Moicano and Drew Dober, man. These 2 guys in a co-main event spot. You get Drew Dober, who bangs, absolute heavy hands, right? I worry about the pace of this fight down the stretch if it gets there. Moicano should go for takedowns. Sometimes he bites down on the mouthpiece and isn't the smartest guy in the world, but this is going to eat up a ton of ownership. When we talk about that centralized ownership, you're talking about each one of these guys, 25 to 35% owned for each of them.
Yeah, sorry, Moicano Dober?
Yes, yeah. Moicano Dober. I was surprised about the ownership in this purely from 13 fights on the card.
Yeah, I kind of I think Dober is going to be pretty highly owned.
Me
Not
too.
maybe not like certainly, but I think he's going to be one of the higher owned underdogs. And so I'm playing
Boom or bust.
yeah, it is. I'm surprised like the inside the distance line on this isn't even a little bit higher. But I'm kind of going with Moicano. Like they're both kind of like Moicano's kind of a character in particular, right? Like,
Money Moicano, yeah.
yeah,
YouTube, and give me my money.
yeah. So I don't know. I kind of like Moicano in this spot. I think he's like pretty good inside the distance, pretty good first round finish for like an $8,400 fighter. And I think that Dober's the same thing is true of Dober at his price at 7,800. Pretty good inside the distance. But I think people are going to end up going more to Dober, so that they can then fit in like one of the higher priced fighters like Natalia Silva, who's maybe not that likely to score well. And so it's a little bit of like galaxy braining it, but I'm ending up over the field. I think on my Kano, and I think I'm probably going to be at the field with Dober, maybe a little bit under if he like sees more ownership than like our 26%. But yeah, I kind of like Moicano at the spot.
Yeah, I mean, he's the grappler too, right? Like for fantasy purposes, we automatically want a grappler, I think, unless there's a huge distinct striking advantage and takedown defense. But I agree with you. Like, I think that Moicano has a higher ceiling. And the problem is, I feel like on this particular card, even a second round finish might not be that good because he would get controlled in the first round. You know what I mean? A Dober win at 7,800, he's just priced enough, right? Like there's some fighters down below that we can get to and maybe might be a little bit more popular. Now talk to me about this middle range, which I was talking about. Like, how are you kind of ranking these guys? The Medeiros fight, the Lee, the Stolyarenko. Like I felt like the Lee Stolyarenko range, these two, Carolina Builder, those fighters are going to be a little bit overlooked. And we rarely see this middle range overlooked. That's the rare thing.
Yeah, I actually like Stolyarenko a lot in this spot. Like she has a sneaky high first round finish odds, and it's probably gonna be like armbar or bust. But I guess like there was some question whether she could make this weight, and she looked good on scales. And Carolina is like not a fighter that is gonna generally put up like that high of a score. Yeah, I think she's got like looking at her wins.
I don't want to get burned by her though. I don't know about you, but I've been burned by her fading her. I've been burned by her taking her to win a fight. It's like this lady actually wins fights in the UFC sometimes, but she's not UFC caliber. That's the problem. And it seems like Stolyarenko, like you said, it's low percentage submission game, but it should be enough in this spot.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like Carolina. I think her only like good drafting score is against Priscilla Cachoeira, who like is always like in your face trying to get punched, right? So like Cachoeira like gives up like massive scores that he feels like all the time. I don't feel like Stolyarenko is going to do that. And I just like the idea that she's like making a lower weight and looking good doing it. I should just be Molly McCann. So I don't know. I don't think she's going to see a lot of ownership. Like, so I like the idea of being over the field on Stolyarenko. I thought Liam had an interesting take. I forget whether it was on the Ground and Pound podcast or his own stuff. That, like,
it might have been the name of the podcast. Don't spoil it. You still have 30 minutes before lock once we go after it. But there's a question in chat. Stolyarenko or Dober. But here's the thing from TJ. TJ, there's a fight. I'm not even going to answer that yet. I'm going to give it to Scroll with a little bit more of a question. Young Lee versus Blake Builder. Pace of the fight is going to be there. It's another fight that is super low owned, I think, compared to a normal slate. This fight should be a lot more higher than what it is. You're talking about Lee at 26%, Builder going to be about under 20. I expect Builder to be a little bit more because of win equity. But here's the thing. People don't want to play a guy like Lee, right? And the reason being is because what does he show for his first UFC fight? 50 fantasy points. That's not good, right? That's not good at all. But when you correlate that inside the distance, I believe it was 140 the last time I checked. I'll check it while I throw it off to you. But yeah, it's a 140. It's plus 140 inside the distance at the mid range.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of like Stolyarenko versus Dober, we're showing Dober with lower ownership than Stolyarenko, and I don't really buy into that. I think Dober will probably be higher. I who knows? We'll flip over the cards.
Smaller the field, it'll go up.
Was it?
Smaller field, it'll go up. higher dollar, it'll go up. Smaller field, it'll go down. I mean, larger field, it'll go down.
Yeah, so I like the idea of doing like Stolyarenko instead of Dober because she's got a better chance to win, and she actually has a better chance to win in the first round.
Mhm.
And I think she's probably gonna. It's like if you have the money, I'd go to Stolyarenko. For the Lee Builder fight, I kind of like Lee. Like Builder doesn't put up high scores. I don't know. I'm not getting a ton of Blake Builder. I think Lee's got. Let me verify the odds here. Yeah, Lee has like pretty decent odds for the first round finish, about 20%. About the same as like Kizriev, Peterson.
I was going to say one of the better on the card. I'd say top 5.
Yeah, because we don't have anybody with like that 40%, 50% chance of like ending the fight in the first round. So Builder is at about half that, about 11% first round finish odds. So I'm just siding with Lee there. I do think people will go to Blake Builder like for a little bit of salary savings, and I am trying to just kind of be overweight on these mid-range fighters so that I don't need the salary savings.
I think you'll see a lot of weird type middle range builds too. Like you're going to see, I'll just throw it out a random type of build, but like a Builder, Dober, Quinones, or like a Dolidze in there, right? Like one of these weird ones, they get another piece of that mid, then they go right to the top, right? There's just, once you get past Muradov, it's like, it's not easy to pick somebody.
Yeah, I really don't like the low end, the lower end range, right? Like this, yeah, exactly. Everybody cheaper than Muradov has major question marks. Like if they'll even put up a decent score in a win. And I'm usually the person saying like, oh, at like 6,700, any kind
I know
of
you are. That's the funny thing. but there's one fighter that's actually going to be owned here, and she actually said the no word. Squirrel. What's the no word?
Oh, retirement. Yeah.
Retirement. You just don't say that. Diana Balbita, 20%. When I first saw this, I'm like, oh, okay, Balbita's actually turning things around. She's decent. Like, okay, she got turned back by Carolina. That's going to happen, right? If Carolina took on Molly McCann, I don't want to know how ugly it would be, but I think KK could win that fight, right? Molly, though, it's like, you know what they want. They have something there that she's older, though. She scored over 100 points last time out, almost 110 points. She's 9,300. I think she potentially is under-owned, man, at 25% on this slate.
Molly, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
100%. Yeah. Not Belbeated. I'll never get behind an R word unless it's a clear-cut Phil Hawes situation where you're facing.
Who was the guy? Who's like a Hall of Famer? They just crushed Nico Price.
Uriah, I think.
Yeah. So sometimes the retirement fight can go well, but I don't see that for like Diana Belbita. Yeah, I agree. I actually really want to be under the field on Belbita, and normally when I see like a fighter like that in below 7,000, I'm like, oh, she's not going to be owned enough. I think Belbita is showing up as like a cash game play, and I think like people are just like ducking those projections into like GPPs, like tournaments, and like I don't like the idea of like even owning Belbita at 20%. And I think Molly McCann's going to beat her. I agree. So I'm trying to avoid Belbita. I think she's my lowest fighter.
Hey, we have a meatball sub in the chat. That makes sense. Hey, man, if she's going to be in top position, why not a meatball sub, right?
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
We all like meatball subs. Very, very punny. But, they're so funny because these two fights are going to be polar opposite if it gets ugly and down the stretch. But I think they fall into the same range, and then we can kind of get out of here. The first one that's a actually fun target is the Quinones in Madero spot, and then the ugly one. Have you ever seen two fatties fat? Because Peterson and Pogues might put on the fattiest fat show of all time. This might get so ugly that we're both. It might be entertaining. It might be really fun. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I actually kind of like Pogues in this spot just for the price. And
he's got like a fat belly and like I don't even want to say a fat booty, but like there's fat coming out of everywhere out of his shorts.
That's control time if he gets on top. You're not getting up from underneath him. So yeah, I'm actually going for those for the control time. Because control time isn't like a massive score, right? But it's points, and it's 7,300. I think he's 73 or 7,400.
75, yeah.
Okay, yeah, 75.
Mhm.
Like control time, can add up. It doesn't add up to like 120 point score generally, but it can add up, to a 90 point score. So, yeah, if Pogues gets the win with some control time takedowns,
But
on the Pogues
Peterson's
side
gaining
there,
these takedowns. That's the funny part, Squirrel. Like Peterson on Contender Series, I'll pull it up right now. He actually had 3 takedowns, a submission in the second round, 4.5 minutes of control himself. So I actually think sneakily that it's a fun target, but I'm praying it looks ugly and they don't score.
yeah. So yeah, I don't have a ton of the fighters. For the first fight of the night, but I do have, I think, more Pogues than Peterson.
And I don't know how I could group that fight in with the Quinones and Medeiros, because that's actually a very fun fight. Even Mr. Dana White himself came out and said, if you don't know, now you know on these guys, because these guys are coming to bang.
Yeah, and actually, I've heard a lot of people saying like they just don't know a lot about these fighters, and so I find that interesting. And I thought on our projections, like our simulation projections, we have Quinones as like under owned to like 2/3. Like we have him being optimal like 3 times his ownership. Now I think that he'll probably have ownership that's a little bit higher. Yeah, I think we're projecting like 12% ownership and something like 30-something% optimal. He's got like decent win odds for a $7,700 price tag. So if there's activity there as well, I think he did put up. So he's had one fight he lost
61.
Akpress put up 61 on a loss. Like that's not a terrible score on a loss. Like if you turn that around, and he's winning the fight and getting a little bit more activity, and adding the 30 points for a win at 7,700, like that's a pretty good score. So yeah, I definitely want to be with field of Quinones, kind of just based off of the the simulation results. And then Medeiros, I don't know a ton about him, but again, like if he's going to be active, then
somebody in their face. There's a lot of these fights, right? That somebody's going to be in their face that produces scoring. It's just, can they do that for the sustained 30-27? That's kind of the problem on this particular slate from a macro standpoint.
Yeah, but like looking at like Medeiros or Quinones, right? Like one of them is probably going to win that fight, and they're probably going to outscore Natalia Silva. And they're going to do it a lot cheaper than Natalia Silva.
Yep.
And so, like, yeah, at the beginning of the night, it looks like, oh, yeah, Natalia Silva looks really good. But, like, she's probably going to get outscored by either Medeiros or Quinones at a much lower price tag.
Yeah, I mean, simple question, Quinones or Pogues? I mean, that's one of the worst questions I think I've ever asked in my life, because it seems obvious, but it also doesn't.
Yeah, go with Quinones. Like, they're both underdogs. I got to break down these answers to give him TJ.
I know. TJ's just using us, let's be honest. But hey, one last fight. I think it's simple. If it's the last fight we talked about, it's for a reason. But Maxim versus Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson fighting every other week, basically. He needs a win. I will say Maxim sometimes fights to a close decision, so it might be one of those flyweight fights that just doesn't score well, and then there's a split decision that doesn't go well. But the ownership, I mean, no, I don't think anybody's going to go here, right? Like, we're looking at Maxim at a 25% owned, and then you have Charles Johnson at 10%. Problem is, Charles Johnson just doesn't do anything unless he gets a finish or he has a distinct advantage. We have Maxim. I actually tagged him because of an ownership play. Simple as that. He potentially has a guy who can't stop takedowns and actually can get cooked. If you've seen Charles Johnson's losses, Squirrel, the guy can get taken down the stretch, and actually sneakily he gets up, which is even more fantasy points.
Yeah, actually, I really like Maxim in this price. At the ownership, at the price, everything. Don't really like Charles Johnson. He's not active enough. So even in a win, like he's one of those fighters I was talking about. Yeah, 7,300. I even question like if he gets a 60-point win, what is it? It's not necessarily a fight. Even at 7,300, it's not a score we necessarily want.
I like the guy because he's active, like literally active, not active in his fights. Like, like he's fighting every other week, right? But that also presents problems. Like, you got to heal up, man. You need to take some time. You can't just be jumping back in there. Work on certain tips of the trade, like takedown defense. But that's a good thing. Like, it's interesting. We even missed Gilbert Urbina versus Radke. There's so many ugly fights on this slate. You can't even talk about all of them.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a little bit of an ugly night, but yeah, it should be a fun fight card. And it's an opportunity to kind of avoid some massive ownership. It might be like projection flaws and ownership flaws. Just I don't like 20%. Are we still showing like 20% Dolidze?
Yeah, it is. I don't know how, but yeah, I guess it makes sense because if it's going to go to a decision, women's MMA, like that narrative continues to be a thing, right?
I don't know. Yeah, even 6,900. Like Dolidze doesn't put up big scores. She's probably like not got her head inside the octagon.
I'll say one more thing. Don't fall for the Charles Radke trap. If you're going to play Charles Radke, you better hope he gets him out of there because he will just like hold that Blood Diamond fight was the worst in the UFC. Let's just call it how it is. That was ugly. That was there was nothing happening in that fight. That's what he has to do to win fights in the UFC. Gilbert Urbina, though, I don't think people are going to get behind him. We're showing 33% ownership. I think this fight's going to go under owned. A lot lower than what it says, maybe not under owned.
Yeah, no, I like Urbina here. He's got pretty good first round finish odds. Like people kind of aren't talking a lot about him. He's not showing up with a ton of ownership. I think people are going to try to spend up or spend down. But I like Urbina. I think up a big score here, like not necessarily the most talented fighter, but it's all about the opponent. So yeah, I like Urbina.
It could be our final time to fade Luana Carolina, Charles Johnson, and Charles Radke. Think about this. 2024, we're starting it off right, Squirrel.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, some of these fighters are probably on their way out, but that's okay. We'll enjoy the fights anyway.
Absolutely. TJ, I hope you got your winning lineup for another week in a row here. But for Squirrel, myself, TJ, we will see you guys next week.